Alrighty, folks, here it is, Saturday, November 11th. What am I here talking about today? I'm talking about the sheer volume of stupidity that I've seen floated recently, ever since, well, starting with Las Vegas, most recently looking at Sutherland Springs. The stupidity I'm talking about is coming from the anti-gun left, whether they be politicians or media sources. Every time one of these incidents happen, every time, the first thing they're out there doing is saying we have to do something, we need to do something to stop these mass shooting incidents. They always ask the question, how can we prevent these mass shootings? The simple, blunt answer is you can't, not by gun laws anyways. So let's talk about why I say that, because obviously that deserves a little more attention than just a straight up answer. So you got to look at some commonalities between these mass shooters. And this, you can look at all the different incidents and you see these common traits. First off, 99% of the time they're choosing a gun-free zone, and if it's not a gun-free zone, it's a soft target. Meaning soft target as in they're not expecting a fight. Most of them, well, I'm going to skip that for a second. Let me go on. Most of them plan their attacks well in advance. They gather all the tools that they are going to need, whether that some people, in some cases, has been attempting to put explosives together. Most of the times it's gathering up their weapons. And in this instance, in this particular part of their preparing, gun laws have no effect. For the people who are not previously prohibited persons, they can go out and buy whatever guns it is they need. People that are prohibited persons have no problem getting guns, or they can, I'll show you in a minute, but they can build their own. Okay, this is the 21st century. The difficulty in building firearms is not there any longer. It doesn't take a machinist or a blacksmith to actually build their own firearm. There are tools out there. There are reasonably priced CNC machines that you can buy, put on your desktop, program in what you need to program, hit a button, walk away, and come back, and you'll have the parts sitting there that you can put together a functional firearm. That genie's out of the bottle. There is no way to get it back. Firearms are here. There is nothing we can do to eliminate them from being in existence. So moving on from the gathering their tools, then they commit their act, and either they have no escape plan or they have a minimal escape plan, and that minimal escape plan usually involves preparation for a confrontation with law enforcement or an armed good guy. So looking at Vegas, that shooter there offed himself. Looking at Sutherland Springs, he ended up offing himself after he got shot by a good guy with a gun. You can look back at most of these incidents. The bad guy, after he's done doing his evil deeds, ends up killing himself. Okay, these aren't, so that's their method of operation. That's what they do. That's their MO. Okay, they plan ahead. They look at the target. They get their tools. They commit their act, and then they kill themselves, or they go out in a blaze of glory in a shootout with the cops. So, if you're trying to prevent these actions via litigation, legislation, you have to look at what causes laws, what causes people to change their behavior based on a law. Easiest example is speeding, driving your car, speeding. Something that I would hazard a guess every single person on this planet with a driver's license has done at one point in their life. Some of us, it's on a daily basis. What causes people to follow the traffic laws? What causes you to not speed? Is the law that says this is the speed limit, does that prevent you from committing that crime? No, it doesn't, obviously, because we've all sped. What prevents us, most of us, from violating those laws on a daily basis is the threat of punishment if we are caught violating the law. It's the same thing for most people when you're driving, including cops when we're off duty, driving along in your car and you're on the freeway and you're cruising and you see a cop car either on the side of the road, on the on-ramp, or all of a sudden you catch one in your rearview mirror. The first thing you think is, oh crap, am I speeding? And then you look at your speedometer and you're like, oh, okay, I'm okay. Or, oh, he's coming after me. So it's not the law that prevents you from speeding. It is the threat of punishment. So looking back at our mass shooters here, these guys plan on going out in a blaze of glory or offing themselves. There is no threat of punishment that's going to affect their behavior. If they are planning on dying at the end of this, nothing you can do legislatively is going to prevent them. They aren't out there telegraphing their plans. They're not telling people what they're going to do. They're doing all this stuff in secret, and then they're going out and committing their act. So that's why gun laws are never going to prevent a mass shooting. They just aren't. Guns are available. Whether there's, what's the latest count I've seen is 320 million firearms in the United States. Anybody who wants to get a gun can get a gun. The only people who any gun laws are going to affect are law-abiding citizens. So what I want to look at is a couple other things here. First off, sticking with the Sutherland Springs mass shooting. Sorry, I'm going to have to whip out the glasses here because this thing printed out really small font. This is an article that appeared in the Chicago Tribune, written by a woman named Dahlene Glanton, D-A-H-L-E-E-N. Sorry if I murdered the pronunciation there. Anyway, the article is titled "Concealed Carry Laws Are a Useless Weapon Against Church Shootings." And she looks at, she starts talking about a woman named Mary Shepard, who's the one who filed the lawsuit against Chicago regarding concealed carry. She talks about that woman's incident, which happened to be in a church basement where she was a volunteer. And then she goes on to compare that incident where a single attacker came down into the basement and beat up two elderly women. She starts comparing that to the shooting in Sutherland Springs. And I'm going to read a couple of lines here specifically, or I'm going to pick this. It's not, they're all separate sentences, but a paragraph's worth of words here. But it is unlikely a parishioner armed with a handgun would have been able to subdue a determined killer like Devin Kelley. Dressed in all black, wearing bulletproof tactical gear, carrying a military-style rifle, and equipped with dozens of rounds of ammunition, Kelley entered the Texas church prepared for a massacre. When he was done, 26 people, and about half of them children, were dead. This is how the Texas Attorney General responded. This is in quotes. "All I can say is that in Texas, at least we have the opportunity to have concealed carry," he said. "And so there's the opportunity that gunman will be taken out before he has the opportunity to kill very many people." End quote. Now this is back to the author, Dahlene Glanton's words. "The Attorney General is delusional if he thinks an armed church member or even a security guard could have frightened Kelley into submission." Apparently Dahlene Glanton isn't familiar with the facts of what actually happened in Sutherland Springs. It wasn't cops, and it wasn't the shooter that stopped them. It was an armed citizen with an AR-15 who stopped the bad guy. The bad guy wearing tactical gear and with an AR-15. Looking at the way this incident started, the suspect, I refuse to use his name even though most media sources continue to use it, was outside the church, started shooting in through the exterior walls of the church. Then he entered the church and began shooting all of the unarmed occupants of the church. Her claim here is that had there been armed members inside the church, they would not have been able to stop him. I'm calling bullshit on that. Had there been armed members inside the church, as soon as he started shooting from the outside, they could have set up in a secure location to cover the doors, and as soon as the bad guy entered, they could have engaged him. Whether they killed him or not, they're going to shoot him, and he's going to be injured. Whether they hit him in the vest or not, it wouldn't have mattered. It would have been facing a not soft target. This would have been people shooting back at him. We can see what happened as soon as somebody shot at him. As soon as the armed citizen with the firearm got there and shot at him, the bad guy jumped in his car and left. They chased him down the road. During the firefight with the armed citizen, he was shot twice. Don't know if there were lethal wounds or not. However, he ends up crashing his car at the end of the long chase and killed himself. Just like most of these other guys do. They're chicken shits. They kill themselves. They don't want to face bad or good guys with guns. They're looking for soft targets. Okay, continuing on from her statement regarding the Attorney General. She talks about a shooting in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm not going to mention the shooter's name there. Again, this is her words. Again, a handgun would have been as powerless in Sutherland Springs as it would have been against shooters' .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol and the arsenal of magazines and hollow point bullets he used to kill 9 people during Bible study at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. I didn't realize carrying a .45 caliber handgun semi-automatic pistol made you bulletproof. That seems to be what she's saying right here. Let me read that again. A handgun would have been as powerless in Sutherland Springs as it would have been against shooters' .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol. Is this lady crazy, or is she being serious? I don't care what caliber handgun you're carrying. If I shoot you, it's going to hurt or probably kill you, depending on where I shoot you. And then she writes here, it was easy for gun lovers to write off shooters' racially motivated attack as the acts of merely still lawmakers never did anything to keep people like the shooter from having access to firearms. It's odd that she would point that out. She's talking about she's saying that lawmakers never did anything to prevent these people from getting firearms. That's because the law already exists. The shooter in the church in South Carolina and the shooter in Sutherland Springs, Texas, both were legally prevented from owning firearms. They both had previous convictions. South Carolina was previous conviction for drugs, and the shooter in Sutherland Springs, Texas, was previous convictions for domestic violence. Both of them were legally prevented from purchasing firearms. However, gun control laws, in effect, federal gun control laws that are supposed to prevent these people from getting guns, failed to prevent them from getting guns because of clerical errors. Gun control, more laws aren't going to fix that problem. This is a human problem, moving from the court system, reporting from the court's criminal records over to the DOJ or to the FBI's database that the NICS system checks. So this is not a situation where we need more laws. Laws wouldn't have fixed this. The law is already there. The law failed. So, speaking of laws, of course, on the heels of this, Dianne Feinstein from my state, sorry America, has decided, she's teamed up with, I think it's nearly 24 Democratic senators, odd that they're all Democrats, right? Have teamed up and introduced another assault weapons ban. Because the assault weapons ban that was in place for, over 10 years that did nothing, we need another one of those. So, here's a statement from Dianne Feinstein on this. We're introducing an updated assault weapons ban for one reason, so that after every mass shooting with a military-style assault weapon, the American people will know that a tool to reduce these massacres is sitting in the Senate ready for debate and vote. We've already talked about it. These guys are not interested in what's going to happen to them after their shooting incident. They have no plans for anything beyond that. That is the end of their life. Any law in place prior to that is not going to prevent them from doing it. That's like saying speeding laws prevent speeding, or drunk driving laws prevent drunk driving. It doesn't happen. What laws are for, no law has ever prevented a crime. What laws do is define punishment for those who violate the crime. So, let me look at another section from the the new assault weapons ban. It says the proposed measure, the measure also proposes to ban bump fire stocks, and this is from a New York Post article. The measure also proposes to ban bump fire stocks and other devices that allow semi-automatic weapons to fire at fully automatic rates. When the whole bump fire thing went off, there was dozens of videos floating around showing you how simple it is to bump fire a rifle. I have bump fired nearly every semi-automatic rifle I own. I don't own a single bump fire stock because I live in California. They're not legal here. Plus, they're $100 waste of money for a novelty item, essentially. Beyond that, my finger is the only tool I need to bump fire a rifle. Other people will tell you need a belt loop also. I've managed to bump, I never even knew the belt loop trick. I've managed to bump fire my rifles by just using my finger and pulling the gun forward into my trigger finger. So are they going to ban my trigger finger? Bump firing does not require any kind of mechanical device. Getting beyond that, the Madman opened fire on an open-air concert in Las Vegas last month, outfitted his weapons, a couple of them, I'll clarify that even though they don't here, with bump fire stock that allowed him to turn his semi-automatic rifles into rapid-fire weapons and spray thousands of rounds in the span of about 10 minutes. He killed 58 people and wounded hundreds more in the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. That's accurate. He did kill 58 people and wounded hundreds more during that incident. And so let me look at this incident as they've described it here. In 10 minutes, he killed 58 people and shot hundreds more. Actually, a lot of those hundreds more that were injured were not injured by bullets. They were injured by being trampled. We'll get that. We'll just give them that. So, 10 minutes. It's been argued, and I would agree with the argument, that a good shooter with even a bolt-action rifle, properly sighted in with a decent scope, we're talking 400 yards, is what they said the distance that he was shooting at from an elevated position into basically a giant fishbowl with 20,000 people in it. A decent shooter with a bolt-action rifle with a good scope, sighted in for that distance, with knowing his bullet drop and everything else, would have been able to do far more damage than some moron with a bump fire stock firing into a crowd blindly. Somebody taking their time with 10 minutes and no one returning fire could have done far more damage. Okay, so what are they describing? Further down into this article, there's a sentence here, and it says, which I'm assuming it's the Democrats' legislation, says that 2,200 types of guns used for, let me put this in quotes, hunting, household defense, or recreational purposes will be exempted. Odd, my home defense weapon is an AR-15. There's a reason my home defense weapon is an AR-15. I've written about this. The first time I wrote about this, I was writing for a political blog back in 2013. 4 years ago. Yeah, math is not my strong suit. 4 years ago, I wrote about this. This was shortly after Sandy Hook, talking about why my AR-15 is my go-to home defense gun. It's the same reason that AR-15s are used a lot by law enforcement. It's the same reason that the U.S. military has gone to M4 carbines, a select fire version of an AR-15. Select fire, for those of you who don't know, means that it's got semi and full auto capability. The reason is I can have a optic that allows me to keep both eyes open when shooting. I can mount I can mount flashlights on it. It's compact enough that I can move around inside my home. It delivers far more lethality than my handgun does. And as opposed to my handgun, or some people will tell you to use a shotgun for home defense, Joe Biden, except I'm not telling you to fire it in the air. My AR-15 is less likely to overpenetrate, both if I hit a person or through sheetrock. There's a reason SWAT teams have gone away from 9mm subguns and have gone to AR-15s or .223 based rifles, or rifles that fire a 5.56 or a .223. It's because the 5.56 ammo is less likely to overpenetrate sheetrock and injure somebody other than your bad guy. It's the same reason I choose it for use as my home defense weapon. Another thing they're talking about, again, is magazine capacity bans. They want to ban these high-capacity magazines. Talked about it in the past. I'll link my other video where I talked about high-capacity magazines and the ludicrousness of these bans. But let's look at it real quickly here, talking about mass shooters. So they want to ban these their chosen capacity, their chosen normal capacity is 10 rounds. So they want to ban anything over 10 rounds. So let's look at this. Even in incidents where the bad guy, let me rephrase that. Bad guys plan this out. They know what they're going to be doing. Even if they were unable to get a magazine with a capacity of higher than 10 rounds, they're just going to bring more magazines. Limiting capacity on magazines, it does not limit your bad guy's ability to do bad stuff. What it does do is it limits the concealed carrier's ability to fight back. On a daily basis, my concealed carry gun is a Glock 19 with a +2 mag extender on the 15-round magazine, which means I carry 17 rounds. That's because I'm law enforcement and I'm in California. I'm exempted from the magazine capacity bans that all civilians are required to obey. So if I am there and I'm a civilian and I'm in the same situation that me as a cop, if I was in, carrying that same gun, I've got, 17 plus 1, I got 18 rounds in that handgun. That's if I'm not carrying a spare magazine. So I've got, 18 rounds. A civilian in that same situation would be limited to a 10-round magazine plus 1 in the chamber. So they'd have 11 rounds. If you want to talk about what difference a few rounds makes, look at the shooting in Sutherland Springs. The good guy with the gun grabbed his gun out of the safe. For whatever reason, he didn't keep any loaded magazines, so he grabbed an empty magazine and a bunch of bullets and loaded the magazine while he was running to engage the bad guy. He talks about it in his interview that was on that Steven Crowder did with him about how when they were in the chase, he had the wherewithal to stop and think, "Oh crap, I didn't have a full mag. I better check and see how many rounds I have left." So he dropped the mag out of the rifle, looked at it. There was 1 round in that magazine, and he had 1 in the chamber. So at this point, he's only got 2 bullets left. Thank God the suspect didn't decide to get in another shootout with him, because he would have been empty. That's what I'm talking about when we're talking about how the magazine capacity bans only hamper the good guy. They don't hamper the bad guy. The bad guy's in his own car. In that incident, they found more guns and more ammunition in the bad guy's car and more magazines. Had he gotten into another shootout with our good guy, he might have won. And he might have got away. Instead, luckily, the good guy's couple of his rounds had hit the bad guy, and the bad guy offed himself. Again, as I've said this countless times in writing, as I said before in videos, magazine capacity bans are ludicrous if you think they are going to save any lives. I'm not going to name the shooter, but you look at the incident back in Santa Barbara. They advertised it as UC Santa Barbara, but it was actually in the town of Isla Vista. This was a California resident who went out and bought several guns, and in California, he decided to just buy 10-round magazines. Not that he couldn't have found, because there's plenty of criminals out there who will find high-capacity magazines. He just stuck with 10-round mags. And he went around and he shot a whole bunch of people and ran a whole bunch over with his car. Again, magazine capacity bans do nothing but hamper the good guy. So, back to my Darlene Glanton article, wherever that went. This is the Chicago Tribune. You want to talk about people who don't know what they're talking about, look at the video that USA Today tweeted out on the AR-15 regarding the shooting in Sutherland Springs. You may have just heard it. My next door neighbor's out there with his chainsaw bayonet. It's not really a chainsaw bayonet. He's just cutting firewood. But that's how ludicrous these people who don't know anything about guns are. They see a picture of something and they think it's a legitimate thing. Yes, a company several years ago, as a joke, during the big giant zombie craze in the firearm industry, decided to come out with a ex-zombie chainsaw bayonet attachment. They called it a chainsaw bayonet. So that's, of course, what USA Today called it. All it was essentially a Ryobi electric chainsaw, and $90 chainsaw that they made a mount for that you could put on a rifle. No reasonable person in their right mind bought one of those $800 chainsaw bayonets and put 5 pounds on the end of their rifle. it was just a media stunt that they did for name recognition for their company. They did it at SHOT Show. A whole bunch of people got a kick out of it. They thought it was neat. No one bought the thing. It was $800. It's ridiculous. You could buy another rifle for the price of that thing. But USA Today, Chicago Tribune, they're putting out, I tend to think it's intentional that they put out this bad info. Either that or they're all just complete idiots and know nothing about firearms, and they just babble off stuff that they think is real information. Either way, the general population out there that knows nothing about firearms, that they're not into firearms, they aren't gun owners, they just read the news, they see these incidents on the news, the Sutherland Springs shooting, the Las Vegas shooting, and they read what these mainstream media outlets put out there, and they take it as gospel. They think that the media is doing what the media is supposed to do, which is reporting facts. But the media, whether it's intentional or not, again, I think it's intentional, is putting out bad information. The bigger problem than the media putting out that bad information is the general public soaking it up and thinking that the media knows what they're talking about. That's the problem. I said something the other day on Twitter, and it essentially boils down to this. What does it say about our society when the majority of the people out there care more about someone's emotional reaction, emotional response to a shooting like what has happened in Sutherland Springs than they do for actual subject matter experts on the topic? Okay. You listen to the politicians that are out there screaming for gun control, it's all based on emotion. You listen to people who know what they're talking about and they're telling you. It's not just me, and it's not just pro-gun people. You look at law enforcement. Law enforcement, our job as an entity is to ensure the safety of the public. The overwhelming vast majority of law enforcement does not believe gun control will do anything to prevent these crimes. We aren't saying this because we want crime to be increased. We aren't saying this because we want more people getting shot and killed. We're saying this because we see it on a daily basis. We see the difference between someone who can protect themselves with a firearm and someone who is a victim of somebody. There's an old saying, goes way back to 1800s, talking about God created man, Sam Colt made them equal. The gun is the great equalizer. It allows a woman who's 5 foot tall to effectively defend herself from a 6'8", 280-pound football player. It allows people to protect themselves, and there's no logical reason that government should be preventing them from doing so. Another thing I said on Twitter the other day, and I'll say it again here. You look at incidents like what happened in Sutherland Springs. You look at incidents like what happened in Las Vegas, and there's two typical responses that the average person out there has. There's two groups of people. One group of people looks at that and says to themselves, thank God I wasn't there. My family and I were not there. We're safe. We're at home. And then they feel bad for everybody there, which is normal, and everybody feels bad for everyone who is there. Okay, that's not what I'm getting at here. There's another group of people who look at an incident like Sutherland Springs, who look at an incident like Las Vegas, and they go, my God, I wish I had been there. I would have been able to stop that guy, or I would have been able to try to do something to stop that guy. Las Vegas is a bad example for that, just based on that whole incident and the way it was. But there were people there who did what they could to try and help. There were ex-military guys. There were regular old citizens who had no military law enforcement experience, and there was off-duty cops, and they were all working together trying to save people. Sutherland Springs, an armed person could have ended that very early on. That is why the Attorney General of Texas is saying we need more good people with guns that could have stopped this. That's why this woman, Darlene, I can't remember what her last name is, the one writing for Chicago Tribune, why she does not know what she's talking about. She's having an emotional reaction to what happened. It's time that the general public stop listening to these people who are trying to base all of their responses on emotion. You cannot legislate based on emotion. You have to legislate based on logic. Yes, we all have emotional reactions when a whole bunch of innocent people get killed. but you cannot go around writing laws based on those emotions. You've got to stop, separate emotion from logic, and look at things logically. I'm trying to do that in this video. If you agree, please share this video.